invite these students and like the future places, invite some of our seniors, so it's more of an intergenerational experience and also kind of, innovative. So anyway, yeah, just trying to, but I'll try to come to the theory. I guess I'm gathering.
Joe will be talking to her about it.
Good. Yeah.
For a house meeting, what came out of our house meeting. And I did this tonight with
Yeah, and it's fascinating because how do we talk to each other when we do things so differently?
I knew I was
Even here. Yeah, I know Kyle was saying, it's not like everyone's making a decision about it'll go away and be quiet. Yeah. Yeah, think about it. But there's all, you know what, I stay optimistic. There's solutions. There's a lot of problems. There are solutions. We just have to like get to a place where we put them into.
That's what I like about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, let me see if I can get some friends who aren't affiliated with them to come on the 30th. Yeah. That'd be great. Okay.
I'll put more into
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll try to focus on that.
No problem.
Billy goes. It's Instagram ready.
That's out the street.
Yeah. Right.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Christopher. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the privilege and the honor and the responsibility and the joy in this season of serving as this church's acting senior minister, this church we love and we call Fountain Street Church. Before we get too far, I'll just jump right to it. This is our last Sunday in the sanctuary until September, part of a long-standing tradition. And this has been a year like no other. We knew it would be. We took 18 years apart from one another. Excuse me, I'm feeling very emotional today. Okay. We had 18 months apart. And then we came back on September 12th. And it was such a glorious moment, but it was scary. It was so scary. And it was overwhelming. And I felt like a baby. I didn't know what I was doing. So we were all doing our best together. And so this morning, we cannot possibly go into this summer without looking back and holding what a powerful, special moment that was, and holding what a powerful year this has been, loss and tragedy and all, joy and hope and wonder and all. So the music today, all of the readings today, and many of the vignettes you hear today are from September 12th, 2021. And you are invited to experience those pieces of wisdom and insight and literature and the music and everything that comes with it, with the gravitas and the reverence of where we were then and where we are today. Additionally, as I worked on some sort of message for today, I found myself enamored in all of the seasons that might have felt similar to the one we've shared throughout history. And so there will be 3 vignettes offered from 3 different senior leaders of this community dating back to the late 1800s through today. So you'll hear those as well, because this church has been through a lot, much like the world we share. So welcome. Because no matter who you are, whether you were here in this Cathedral of Love on September 12th, or you were joining us from home like you might be today, whether this is your very first time here, or you were born into this church, or married into this church, or have celebrated a lifetime here, whether you live in Grand Rapids, or you are a part of this community in a different way, in a different place and space, you all know that no matter what you believe or what you don't believe in at all, or who you love or who you're loved by, each and every one of us, each of us is welcome in this space where love and justice and inclusion and history and ancestry and the future and belonging are the shared work of all of us. So on behalf of everyone who calls this their home, on behalf of my colleague, Reverend Greta Seidohl, on behalf of the ministry of this magnificent choir under the leadership of Austin and Margie, Jonathan, and all of our tech staff, welcome to this special worship service. We are going to begin our time together by singing a hymn as one voice as you're able. So I want to invite you to sing hymn number 39, Bring, O Mourn Thy Music. This was the first hymn we sang, which wasn't until Easter, and a joyous moment it was to sing again, and a joyous moment it will be to sing it together. So as you are able, please join us in hymn 39, found in the great hymnal in your pew. Bring, O Mourn Thy Music. Thank you. You may be seated.
Try that again.
Our call to worship this morning comes to us from the call to worship that welcomed us in for the very first time back in September. It is given to us by Reverend Hannah Roberts Villeneuve.
The storm is passing over, the old hymn says.
Except
The storm has not passed over just yet, has it?
here for this hour together,
We rest in the eye of the storm.
we gather not as a changed people, but as a changing people.
Here in the eye of the storm,
The calm, common center,
the place where the pressure reduces,
where the winds die down.
we are finding each other, near and far,
And in new ways of being together.
again and again and again. We gather not as a changed people,
But as a changing people.
at once we find an empty seat.
And a new face.
We see new gray hairs,
And others who have grown.
at least 5 inches taller since we last met them here.
New lines of worry on a furrowed brow.
Visible on Zoom screens or above a mask.
We gather not as a changed people, but as a changing people.
Looking up the walls of the cyclone,
We see towers of wind and rain and clouds.
held up around this hour by the forces of circling chaos.
Because the storm has not actually passed over after all.
And so we gather not as a changed people,
But as a changing people.
here in the eye, the pressure goes down.
And the winds die down.
Perhaps we glimpse the sun.
Comforted even as we know that this is a pause that's temporary.
We take a moment
And a breath.
to join together.
Again.
We gather not as a changed people,
But as a changing people.
changing,
Breathing.
being, knowing that this is but a moment.
Grateful beyond measure for this moment.
Come, let us worship together. This morning's ancient witness comes to us as a series of fragments from the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus. Many fail to grasp what they have seen and cannot judge what they have learned, although they themselves know. They tell themselves they know. All things change to fire, and fire exhausted falls back into things. Air dies, giving birth to fire, and fire dies, giving birth to air. Water thus is born of dying earth, and earth of water. The river, where you set your foot just now, is gone. Those waters giving way to this, and this, and this.
The choir had the opportunity to choose three of their favorite or most memorable pieces from this year. And so that was the second piece that they chose for us this morning. Thank you, choir, for offering that to us again this morning. So as I mentioned in our welcome, we will have three vignettes from historic sermons from some historic leaders of this church. Our first historic sermon vignette comes to us from Reverend Milton McGorrell, who served Fountain Street Church as the senior minister from 1933 through 1944. Hear what those historic words have to offer our contemporary community of faith this morning. The best thing about a theology is that it will change. Growth in point of view is expected in a church like ours. To believe identical things one did years ago is no proof of exceptional piety. It may probably be more evidence of intellectual laziness. Intellectual freedom to find truth where it may be, within or without the Bible, is the purpose of this church. So lead wheresoever it will and cost whatsoever it may. You are invited now to join again in another beloved hymn, this time hymn number 10. It is in our hymnal. The title is Immortal Love, and you are invited to join in and stand as you are able or comfortable. Hymn number 10, Immortal Love.
Our contemporary witness this morning comes to us from the Rabbi Brian Mayer. Statistically, most spiritual religious growth regarding theology and our understanding of reality happens when a tragedy forces us to recontemplation of what had, until that time, been comfortable for us. That is to say, most people do not willingly enter into a process to rethink how they view the world. It is only when the world seems to be turned on its head that change is needed. In other words, the change is often triggered when the detriment of not changing is too high, or when reality no longer seems comfortable.
It has been a privilege to watch the choir grow in so many ways this year. In numbers, but also in depth and breadth and inclusion and belonging. I've always said that one of the best things about Fountain Street Church so far as the music is that the choir genuinely feels inclusive, and even if you're sitting out there thinking, I can't sing in a choir, they make you feel like you are with and within them when they sing. So thank you for all of the gifts you brought this year. Thank you. Our second historic sermon vignette comes to us from, and this might not sound that historic, the Reverend David Rankin, who served as our senior minister in this very church from 1982 through 1998. Hear his historic words from this pulpit and see how they offer something to each of our contemporary spirits. The greatest danger to a genuine church is becoming a feel-good religion, peddling sugary thoughts and easy-to-digest spirituality, serving the fodder of diversion and self-satisfaction, promoting a flabby theology which encourages flabby lives. When religious vitality lies in the risk-taking adventure of challenging everything in the name of the betterment of the world. You are invited to respond in our third and final hymn today, hymn number 183. Hymn 183, The Wind of Change Forever Blown. And please join and stand as you're able. Hymn 183, The Wind of Change Ever Blown.
Our third and final historic vignette comes to us from Reverend Alfred Wishart, who served as senior minister of this church from 1906 through 1933. That was during the time in which the building of Fountain Street Church burned. Hear what his historic words offer our contemporary community of faith this morning. The building we love has been destroyed. It stood for nearly half a century. Many of you baptized there. Some of you married in that building. It has been the seat of blessed communion occasions. It has been a place where many of you received your most religious instructions and inspiration. You loved its beautiful lines and its restful color. It was your church home. Now, it is gone forever. And what shall we do? How shall this adversarially affect us? What is done cannot be recalled. Like the laws of Medes and Persians, it is fixed. But what has happened in its relationship to our present and our future? That is the question for you and me to decide. Reverend Alfred Wishart, May 27th, 1917.
Sunday, May 27th to be exact. Literally days after a scorching fire burned Fountain Street Baptist Church to the ground, a weary and devastated but fiercely determined community gathered in the Powers Opera House for worship, bewildered by their loss and fearful for their future. And I'd say to you this morning that I can't imagine what they must have been feeling that morning, except I think I can. I think many of us can. In fact, I've been known to say to my colleagues, and even to some of you here, that I think that Fountain Street Church has experienced more than one fire in its history. I think that beyond the devastating loss of the physical structure in 1917, historic Fountain Street Baptist Church and contemporary Fountain Street Non-Cradle Church have seen a series of fires both within and beyond these cathedral walls. In revisiting the quote read for us earlier by Rabbi Meir, we're reminded that most spiritual growth regarding theology and our understanding of reality happens when tragedy forces recontemplation of what until that time had been comfortable for us. So that's to say, most people don't willingly enter this process to rethink how they view the world until the world has been turned upside down on its head. And so I think for our purposes, the metaphor of a proverbial fire is appropriate. Tragedy, loss, bewilderment, unknown. The world quite literally turned on its head out there, if not absolutely on fire, calls each of us and all of us toward some kind of action. These moments remind us that regardless of how hard we try and how tightly we grip and how firmly we plant our feet, change, it's inevitable, especially in the face of adversity like the stuff in our world. The river where you set your foot now is gone. It is gone. Those waters have given way to this and that. And I still hear those ancient words of Heraclitus and think about the rivers that we have waded into as a community together. I think about all those moments where we have said individually or corporately or in worship or on boards and committees, haven't we changed enough? only to be met by more news, more tragedy, more heartbreak, more loss, more adversity, in which we realize just how true it is that those ancient waters just keep giving on way to something else. When I stood in front of you just 9 months ago to this week, and we triumphantly opened the doors again to worship and reopened this cathedral of love and this temple of peace, I warned you, and I warned myself, that the waters we once knew had moved on. But I don't think I was quite prepared for what that reality really meant going forward. You see, I was so focused on getting through COVID and out of COVID and getting this building reopened and getting worship going again and staffing and programs that I could have never, I'll say that again, I could have never imagined the year that we would be facing outside of these walls. I had not prepared myself. And as individuals of heart and a collective church of compassion, we have witnessed unthinkable tragedies and unimaginable loss this year, day after day. There was just a shooting 2 blocks from here in which 4 people were shot last night and 1 person died. Unimaginable. And like Rabbi Meir said, we have been forced many times to evaluate and reevaluate this year what has been comfortable but might need to change in pursuit of a better world. Over these past few years, and throughout many of the fires that have been within and beyond these walls, I keep calling upon those words of David Rankin when he said, "Religious vitality lies in the risk-taking adventure of challenging everything for the betterment of the world." Religious vitality lies in the risk-taking adventure of challenging everything for the betterment of the world. It can be, and it is incredibly overwhelming to ask ourselves how these daily tragedies and the constant movement of the waters of change are calling our church into risk-taking adventures. And I've heard many of your laments and your lamentations grumbling about changing yet again, and I've harmonized with most of them. But this is quite literally the work we do. This is quite literally the work of church, and it really should be the work of any church, any vital church, that is. This is the work of religious vitality, to quote Rankin, and it is the work of challenging everything and then changing everything we need to. Changing everything we need to for the betterment of the world. For the last time this church year, I will remind you that no, we cannot fly over as a church to Russia and broker a peace deal. And the same can be said for Israel and Palestine, or North Korea, or Taiwan. We can't all march to D.C. and hop on the Supreme Court bench and start stacking up the briefs with more of our opinions that might sway the future towards justice and love and equity for pregnant and capable bodies or inclusive marriage or voters' rights. And then we can't walk over to Congress, march through the halls, and forcibly take the pens so that we can write the legislation that's needed for a safer, more just and equitable and loving nation. We can't do any of those things. And so we need to ask ourselves, what exactly does religious vitality look like for ourselves and for this church in this time? Right here and right now. We need to ask ourselves what it actually means to challenge everything we need to. And what does it mean to actively change everything we need to? Borrowing those words from Milton McGorrell, growth in point of view is expected in a church like ours. To believe identical things we did years ago is no proof of exceptional piety. It's probably evidence of intellectual laziness. And my beloved friends, the world we are sharing cannot afford for us to be lazy. We can't afford to not grow. We can't afford to not challenge everything, and we can't afford to not change everything we need to for a better world. Our beloved physical building might still be here, but our world around us is burning down. And at times in the past few years, it sometimes felt like it was inside too. And as Wishart said, what has happened and what is happening in this moment is fixed. But how we decide how what's happened is going to shape our future, that is up for you and me to decide together. We are on the brink of history-making decisions inside this church, at a history-making time in a world that you and I are co-writing together. And if it feels like the fate of everything is on the line, it is because it is. From the process of finding a new senior minister, to how we handle an expensive edifice, to how we show up in a world and respond to these rivers of change. From this never-ending journey out of COVID to a new season of programs and gatherings next fall, to discerning what it means to be a community that expands on its long legacy of changing and transforming the world. We are writing a history together that will define whether this church chose to drown in those rivers of change or ride on their currents so that we could choose vitality in pursuit of a better and more just world. So for just a moment, let us put ourselves back in the seats of the Powers Opera House and imagine how we are going to let the fires before us and among us and within us be a catalyst for change for a better world, beginning within ourselves and this church. Because the answer and the pathway towards that kind of collective liberation and religious vitality is a lot closer to home than we might think. If we want to see policy and action change on Capitol Hill, let's also see how it might need to change in room 109 in our governing board. If we want to challenge justice and equity on the Supreme Court, let's challenge how it's happening in our social action work and throughout all of our educational programs. If we want to challenge if we're going to say we want accountability for the police or our elected officials or business leaders and our other educational professionals, let's also expect that same accountability for how our leadership functions within every ministry and team and committee and board. If we crave a society that's rooted in compassionate care, loving kindness, mutual thriving, and care for one another and the earth, let's also crave the presence of that inclusion and that belonging among one another in this congregation we are nurturing together. And if we truly want there to be peace on earth and a spouse that we want it to begin with me and us, then let's truly open ourselves to the rivers of change and the call towards religious vitality and take the risks. Accept the vulnerability and own the work that will commit us, all of us and this church, to the better world we know we can be together. Yes. Let there be peace on earth, and let there be love and hope and joy and compassion. Let there be justice and liberation. Let there be flourishing. Let there be vitality in this church and on earth. Let there be change. Let there be revolution. Let there be restoration, and let there be collective transformation. And let it begin with and within each of us and this church. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with us. Because this is the work that Fountain Street Church was made to do and is ready to do again. So let it be so, and may it be so.
you take a deep breath with me? Keep breathing. It is life-giving. Before Reverend Christopher has a blessing to send us on our way, I have a few brief announcements. And I know that announcements often feel like a breaking point in the sacred space that we have created here together. But I want to invite you to instead think of the announcements as a way that you take what we practice in this hour into the rest of the week, into the rest of your life. That they are not some separate part of who we are, but an extension of who we hope to create together. And my first invitation to that point is a response to the fires, to the change that is happening in our community. Fountain Street Church has joined with over 25 other institutions to join a broad-based organizing network here in West Michigan called Together West Michigan. And we are working as a collaborative and collective of power to bring real, impactful, meaningful change to our communities. But when I say Fountain Street joined, yes, it was a select team that helped make those decisions, but it means all of you too. And so the Together West Michigan team has an ask. I'm going to invite you, this is how you keep your calendar, to pull out your phone and pull out your calendar and get ready to add something to it. I'm giving you permission to take out your phone and worship. Come on. So on June 30th, at 7 p.m. at Westminster Presbyterian is Together West Michigan's big launch. Big, hi, we are here. We represent hundreds of people in Grand Rapids, and we are ready to make change, and we need every butt in the seat we can get. And I use that language on purpose because, to be quite frank, to some extent, I don't really care on June 30th if you're like super committed to Together West Michigan, or you know everything about it, or you're totally signed on. We, the team, really just need your body. We need you to use your body as a sign and a symbol that we care for this community and we care what happens. We need your physical presence and embodiment to show up. Speaking of bodies, if anybody is on our Together West Michigan team here, I see Meredith. If there's other folks, could you stand so folks can see you? We've got Kathleen Higgins, Meredith Bradley, Jean Bailey, Linda Jones is way up there. So those are some folks you can ask if you want more information, but just know that please mark June 30th on your calendars. Please be there. Please bring a friend, bring a neighbor, bring a spouse, and let's see how packed we can get Westminster Presbyterian on June 30th. Please, please. Okay. Coming back a little closer, as Christopher mentioned, this is our last week for the summer in this space. So next Sunday at 10 o'clock, please join us in the chapel, which is just down that hall and around the corner. And that's where our summer speaker series will be. There are flyers in the narthex available to tell you more about what that looks like, or you can learn more in our Friday Flash weekly updates. I'd also like to invite you to mark your calendars for every third Sunday this summer. Our Community Corners program are hosting BYO Picnic and Play. These are intergenerational, all ages, bring your family, whatever family means to you, and let's enjoy some nature and some connection. So that's the third Sundays at 11:30 a.m. The first one is June 19th in Manhattan Park, and I really hope that we'll see you there. Again, there's more info in your Friday Flash. And last but not least, as we make our way out today, you are asked once again to practice what we collectively preach through our offering. Our ushers will be at the narthex doors, ready and waiting for your act of faith in the form of finances. So please give what you can with an open and loving heart. And thank you for being here.
Okay, my friends. Let's see if I can get this. Oh, I should not have touched that. How's that? All right, we're good. Oh my God. Of course, it's like the last Sunday. Some kind of cuckoo bananas has to happen. Okay, we have had quite a year, correct? We have held the fullness of living. We have said over and over, this is the only place you have to be when you are here to just be. We have ritualized the passing of some of our most beloved and dear friends. We have marked some incredible, joyous moments like Christmas again and Advent again and Easter again, the return of the women's service in person. We've had a remarkable year, and none of that happens just because a clergy person or two make it happen. And so as your blessing today, which is just a different form of a prayer, I will admit that I was like, how do I send them out with the most gravitas and reverence? But instead, how about authenticity? Because sometimes the best prayer you can offer is a thank you. And we have so much gratitude to express around here. So I want to go through a somewhat exhaustive list of all of the prayers we have to lift up in making this magical and memorable year possible. I want to start with a remarkable staff team. I want to start with Melissa Jose, our General Manager of Operations, who makes operations operate. And she is always there or somewhere up there and the one you can go to for just about anything. So we give her our sincerest gratitude. And Lori Rickers, who, yes, please clap. I mean, we're going to clap a lot, I'm afraid, but
go on.
Let's express. Lori Rickers, who's our new office person, is remarkable. She's only been here for a short time, and already I am like literally speechless. We were working on a beautiful program for Nessa's memorial, and none of us knew how to do something. And 15 minutes later, she came up with the whole thing. Like, she gave it to me. She was like, I figured out how to print it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So thank you, Lori, for being a part of this team and really supporting this church. Of course, we owe so much gratitude for Lydia Stubbs, who has come back in and given 120% of herself to our character school program and our youth programs. She has pivoted in every way with COVID and with the needs of families and multi-intentional offerings, and so we are so grateful for her and her willingness to come back and support our ministries and be a part of our team again. So thank you, Lydia. There are also people that you don't always see, like our custodial staff, especially Shannon and Darius, who are sometimes here on Sundays, but often in the evenings, and they're just here, making it happen, making it a hospitable place where we all feel like we belong. So thank you both to Shannon and Darius, even though we rarely see you here. And my God, let's lift up a prayer of thanksgiving for Jamie. Mm-hmm. What more can I say? Good Lord. Jamie, thank you. We also have a team of folks who sometimes you see, sometimes you don't, that make the AV and tech ministries possible, and I call that a ministry because without it, we would be a very awkward program church. So we are so grateful for Derek Kopp and John and Cliff and Dick Wood and all who step up. Some of them are back there right now. Also, some hide in a room you never see. Thank you to all of them for making us an inclusive digital ministry as much as we can be. Thank you. Oh, Lord, and then the music staff, Austin. Wow, thank you for jumping in and belonging with and making the choir feel like they belong with you too. And just, I couldn't say more. Thank you, Austin. We have a wonderful sidekick over here, Margie Peterson, who, thank you. Your musical gifts are remarkable. And then, he's probably over there like, when can I start playing? Jonathan Took, my God. Thank you so much. And then, of course, we have this delightful and empowering and empowered assistant minister, Reverend Greta Joe. Early on, people said, gosh, it really feels like you work well together and you kind of like each other. And I said, we do. That can happen between colleagues, so thank you. It's been a party.
Sure.
But it is not only the paid staff, though, while important, that make this place go. There is an entire structure of lay involvement and leadership. From a governing board who has seen some fires and actively put a few out themselves. Governing board, thank you. They don't even get paid. As well as I want to hone in it a bit more to our fearless and fighting officers on the governing board, Amy and Kristen and Shelley and Katie and Wynn. Thank you to them for just the hours they put into this work is remarkable. And since I'm on a roll with boards, I think an often overlooked one who has been working hard this year, and it impacts a lot of things, is the foundation board. The foundation board has been putting a lot of time and energy into their work, and it shows up in some of the special music we can do, or the special programs we can do, or helping us with that crazy edifice issue I talked about earlier. So, the foundation board, thank you to these unsung folks. And stewardship, my goodness. We have a group of creative and compassionate individuals on our stewardship team who are planning a very fun, and I mean fun, and I'm pretty critical, a fun fall for all of us with programs and things that bolster love for this church and supporting it in different and dynamic ways. So thank you to the stewardship who makes this thing cycle. And this is where I can't, if I got into every committee, I would start offending people for forgetting theirs. And so let me just say that there are a million committees and teams that make this plate go, like the properties and the art committee, oh my gosh, and the choir board that helps the choir, and a litany and a wonderful list of everything. All these lay folks who come together in a formalized way, the corners, I could go on, befrienders, I could go on. Thank you to everyone who you don't get mentioned in that group for everything you do to continue to mobilize our ministry together. There's also been a lot of wonderful special music this year. We've had all kinds of guests like Robin Connell multiple times. We had Ed Clifford and his quartet, Bruce and Becca Ling, Natalie Beversluis, and a ton of people in one-off things. It was a musically and profoundly rich year for worship, and so I am grateful for all of you who brought those gifts into our worship and made it the space it was. So thank you to all of them. And the ushers, who, again, it's one of those groups where you're like, oh yeah, I guess they are. Thank you, because you do a lot of random stuff, so thank you. We're almost there. So then there are the other things that have enriched this year, like a rich, rich roster of guest voices that we've had. And that has been an interesting and collaborative effort, but I promised this person I wouldn't say it until the end of the year, but a major driving force, which is probably no surprise, was Carol Koistra, who helped me. Thank you. Thank you. I think she saw the panic in my eyes when I was like, there's 37 Sundays, ahead. And so she said, well, let me help you find some guests. And she's a powerhouse for connecting with them and honing in on them and, getting them in here. And so there were many things I didn't have to lose sleep over, I should say. So thank you, Carol. And on that note, thank you to Randall Jelks and Elias Ortega, Patricia Clark, Fred Johnson, all of the Women's Day organizers, Beth Burkholtz, David Fair, Frank Adewageshik, Rob Keithan, and Jody Betton. We had a wonderful and fun and dynamic group of folks this year. We're blessed. That's why we do the thank you prayer. So, on that note, there's you. Because you show up. You support it. You affirm it. Even when we disagree, I appreciate that you at least come to me and say, not that into that. And so I appreciate 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 that. And so I Because at least we were having a conversation, and that conflict becomes transformation, and that transformation is what we are about here. So, to each and every one of you, and you at home, and all who call themselves a Fountain Streeter or just a fan, thank you for showing up and shaping the last year that we've shared together. Summer is going to be wonderful. Thank you to the summer speakers, they're called the Religious Services Committee, who found all of them. But I think we should take one more breath in celebration and in gratitude for everything we've done together this year. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. I could, thank you. I could say, okay, now we have to start that breath over, Carol, but I won't. Friends, you are loved, and you are a part of this dynamic and changing community. Go into this summer with safety and security and also joy and hope for what comes in the fall if we don't see you until then. We love you. Go in peace.